Good afternoon. Welcome to this edition of Faith, Family, and Political Affairs. Today, I wanted to provide you just a brief update on the developments in the Nolan Xavier Wells investigation. This week, the latest developments seem to focus on the timeline for the events that occurred on July 4th and leading up to when young Nolan's body was discovered on Horn Island, Mississippi, on that Monday following the 4th. Now, as you know, just a brief background for people who may not be keeping up with it. Nolan had traveled to Horn Island, Mississippi, with several of his friends away from their home, Ocean Spring, Mississippi. That evening, the young men who he traveled to Horn Island with, they would return home to Ocean Spring, alive and well. Nolan, however, did not return. His body washed ashore on Horn Island sometime on Monday following the 4th. This week, the timeline of those events seemed to shift a little bit. And I'm just going to share with you some of that. It's kind of difficult to share all of it because this is an ongoing investigation with a lot of moving parts, quite frankly, and it involves media people, it involves the law enforcement, it involves, of course, lawyers, the legal minds. So there are a lot of moving parts. But I try to share with you the essentials so that you know what is the most recent in the case. Because many people around the country are following this case to see if there will indeed be justice for Nolan Wells and, of course, for his family. So we'll begin with, I call this episode of Faith, Family, and Political Affairs, Lawyers, Polygraphs, and the Road to the Grand Jury. Because it seems that that's kind of where we're headed right now. Of course, you know, Ben Crump is the lawyer for the Wells Wonsley family, Nolan's parents. And he has been at their side from the beginning of this. And this week, he accompanied them along with Reverend Al Sharpton to the National Association of Black Journalists annual meeting where the Wells Wonsley family, the parents, had a chance to tell their story, how they came to be involved in this tragedy and how it is sadly impacting their life. Far beyond the loss of their son, they are having to deal with not so friendly public scrutiny. The latest of which has to do with young Nolan's cell phone. We will get into that a little bit later, but just briefly, his mother had to track down his phone. A major part of this whole investigation is that the friends claim that they left Nolan on the island with a young woman. He willingly stayed. They happened to have his phone on the boat where they had all left their phones as they were heading into the water. There is no explanation from these young men, however, as to whether or not Nolan asked to have his phone when he made this decision to stay on the island. There is no clear explanation for how they ended up with Nolan's phone and he ended up on the island. Okay, so I'm going to just share with you a little bit of the response of Nolan's of the lawyers representing now these young men, who all claim to have been very dear friends of Nolan's. So they have indeed hired lawyers. We're very clear that they lawyered up from the beginning, but these lawyers who are going around doing interviews with them now seem to be new lawyers. So we're going to just share with you an interview done with these two lawyers by the trained attorney and prosecutor, Nancy Grace, who also, as you know, has a TV show called Crime Stories with Nancy Grace. So I'm going to share with you her conversation with them, just because it has some very important, we're having a storm here, very sorry, I hope that did not interrupt the sound, but going to share with you just a little bit of her interview with these lawyers. And then we're going to come back and talk about the information that they shared, the questions that she had for them, and how it impacts the investigation going forward. So this is Nancy Grace interviewing Tyler Cox and Edward Paltzik, the attorneys representing the young men who traveled to Horn Island with Nolan Xavier Wells and returned home without him.
So, just because somebody tells you the sky is blue does not mean the sky is blue. You do know that, right?
Well, I can tell you this: they were off Horn Island at 4:30 p.m. on July 4th, and Nolan Wells was seen alive.
Now we're getting somewhere. How can you prove that to me other than them telling you? I assume you've got GPS tracking and the call to CTO?
We have witnesses, among other things, but I can also tell you this: they were off the island at 4:30 p.m., and Nolan Wells was seen alive by multiple people at 6 p.m., still on the island. And I'm sure Tyler would be happy to elaborate on that. But this is a no doubt, 100%.
Please tell me, Tyler.
Yes.
Because I don't believe any of these people, and I don't disbelieve any of these people. I want to hear about witnesses that spotted him alive after 4:30. Because I believe I can confirm the boat left around 4:30. And I'm referring to the Triton. That's the boat they were on. There are a lot of boats. Let's see the video of all the boats out there. So when I say Triton, I'm talking about the boat Nolan was on the way to the island. There's a lot of boats out there and a lot of witnesses too. This is from the Officer Tatum. Okay. There are witnesses placing him there at 6. And I want to be very clear, gentlemen, that I'm not convinced he drowned just because somebody said so. Even if he did drown, that does not mean that there wasn't foul play. Why is that mark on the back of his head? Was he hit on the head and fell in the water? Was he held under the water? Was it an accident? I don't know. But I am very interested in witnesses that place him alive at 6 p.m. Please tell me, Tyler Cox.
So, Nancy, look, we have had multiple witnesses reach out to us two confirmed witnesses that saw Nolan Wells on the island around 6 p.m. on July 4th, well after the Triton, as you said, left around 4:30. And so those witnesses have went to investigators, they've talked to the police, and they've done what they're supposed to do. We've cooperated 100%. So has
Where did they
those
see him,
witnesses.
Tyler Cox? Where did the witnesses see them? Do they know him well enough to make a positive ID? Hey, speaking of a positive ID, control room, please pull up a photo that we showed a couple of days ago. There are 2 or 3 women, white females, walking along the beach, as I recall, each clad in a bikini. There is one, I believe, a white male and one black male walking with them. That, can you zoom in a little bit? That's not really helping me that much. For instance, did your witnesses know Nolan? Can they identify him? Because I'm looking right at this and I cannot identify if the male behind the female on the white, the female wearing a white hat, I can't tell if that's Nolan or not. It's a very blurry photo. I can't make it out. So, do your witnesses know him? I mean, let me see my guess, please. Mr. Polczyk, Mr. Cox, I know the two of you. I don't see both of them. There they are. The two of you have tried a lot of cases, as have I, to get in or attack an eyewitness. You, and it's in the code, the official code of Mississippi annotated. There are prescribed methods under which you cross-examine an eyewitness. For instance, does the witness know the target? Was the lighting sufficient? How far away was the witness? What were the conditions of the eyewitness identification? Was the eyewitness inebriated or high or otherwise incapacitated? How far away were they? Do they wear glasses? It goes on and on and on. It's laid out in the code. Tell me about these witnesses. How do they know it was Nolan? Hey, control room, show me that picture of Nolan on the boat. He's bent over. All I can see are his legs and his behind. The only reason I think that's Nolan is because it matches his swimsuit. Did they see that? How can they identify Nolan? First to you, Tyler.
Well, I'm not sure if the witnesses saw that picture that you just put on screen, but I can confirm to you that these witnesses know Nolan. They've known him for a long time. They were able to make a positive ID. And they told that to investigators. They told them that from the very start.
Had they been drinking?
That I do not know.
How are they sure it was 6 o'clock? Look, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm asking the questions I would ask in court. How do they know it was 6 o'clock? Did they go, oh, there's Nolan Wells at 6 p.m.?
Well, I'm pretty sure, Nancy, they were aware of the time. I'm not sure if they were drinking or not, but they're the ones that came forward to police and investigators, and that's their story to tell. What I'm telling you is they made a positive ID on Nolan Wells around 6 o'clock, and they told that to investigators, all while our clients were off the island around 4:30. So we have positive identification on Nolan on the island an hour and a half after our clients left. So, as you know from your experience as a prosecutor, they can't do two things at once. They can't be on the island at 6 o'clock and be on the boat going off the island at 4:30. So, that's where we are. Our clients have nothing to do with the death of Nolan Wells. We don't know how he died. We want to know. Please tell us. Somebody. We want to know just as much as anyone else. Our clients loved Nolan Wells. They were brothers to Nolan Wells. I've still yet to hear one bad thing about Nolan Wells. He was a good Ocean Springs kid. Just as Chuck Bordy says all the time in the courtroom, these are good Ocean Springs people. So Nolan was a good Ocean Springs person too. They love Nolan. We want to know. Will someone
Okay, just
please
stop right there,
tell us?
Tyler. Tyler, I've got 1 hour, and nobody's running for miscongeniality. Let's just let it be noted, judicial notice. They were all good. Everybody's good. Okay.
What if I told you that the moment your book is published, there could be a giant billboard featuring you and your book in Times Square? And in addition, a video trailer that tells your book's story, a paid advertising campaign.
Tyler,
Yes.
the witnesses that came forward, here's something that would tend to corroborate them, is if multiple witnesses said the same thing. Witnesses separated in time and space, witnesses that are not all friends, witnesses that are not good friends with your clients, that may have a reason to be fuzzy on the time. I'm not saying they are or that they're not. Here's my question to you. Are these witnesses friends of your clients?
I don't think they're friends, and they're not even the same age.
Okay. Next question. How many witnesses place him there on the island at 6-ish?
At least 2 that I know.
2. Do the witnesses know each other?
Yes.
Were they together that day?
Yes.
Have they had a chance to discuss their recollections with each other before they came to police?
Well, I'm sure they did. Nancy, look, they did what they were supposed to do, and they spoke to police officers. And you know as well as I do that if investigators or a DA's office had any sort of probable cause to make an arrest in a case like this, they would. They would have.
Or they may be gathering evidence to make sure they've got all the evidence that there is. I mean, I would wait until I had all the evidence, including a completed autopsy. You know what? I'm going to jump ahead. But regarding the body, regarding Nolan's body, we've heard all sorts of inflammatory things. But the one thing that, well, many things are very interesting and probative. For instance, why was Nolan's neck of so much interest to the original medical examiner that it was removed? His foot wasn't removed. His toe wasn't removed. His ear wasn't removed. Why his neck? The lungs and the neck were removed, which obviously Edward Pulsick touches on COD, cause of death. I understand why the medical examiner took his lungs. He had to run tests on them to determine, did he drown? Of course, all three of us know you can drown and there still be foul play. Somebody whacked you on the head. If somebody held you underwater, it could be any number of things. Or it could be an innocent drowning. But why the throat? What was curious about the throat, Ed? Were there marks on the throat? Was there a ligature mark? Was there manual strangulation? Was there a compression? Were there bruises? Were there scratches? I don't know.
Okay. As always, we hope that the audio was sufficient and you were able to hear all of that clearly. I generally use these videos off of YouTube, and sometimes the sound quality is good, and sometimes it is, has some static or something in it. So I hope that you were able to hear that just fine. I just want to kind of tag in on something that Nancy Grace asked these gentlemen. Again, these are the lawyers for the young men who traveled to that island with young Nolan and returned, without him. No one has called them suspects in this case. Let's just put it there, because quite frankly, there has been no cause of death declared, even though 2 autopsies have been performed. So we still don't know if this is a criminal act. What we know is that young Nolan is deceased. So I thought that it was very important that you heard their conversation around the witnesses. Because as I said in the beginning, the timeline shifted a little bit this week. There's more from the United Cajun Navy, but I'm not going to talk about that because that seems to be still developing. And a lot of what they placed in their reports is now in question in regard to the timeline. So I try to stick with information that has been vetted by responsible journalists or by responsible legal minds. Nancy Grace is a pearl because she happens to cover both of those categories. She is on TV as, she has the Crime Stories with Nancy Grace show. But she is a former prosecutor, so who knows the law and practiced criminal law for many, many years. Okay, so I try to be careful on the sources, that I cite on this platform. But let's just go back to her conversation with the gentleman about these witnesses. The way these lawyers have affected the timeline is that they insist that Nolan was spotted on Horn Island alive around 6 o'clock, and that their clients, the young men who accompanied him there on the boat and who left without him, they insist that their clients left the island around 4:30 on the Triton, on the boat, without Nolan. I have to just put a pin here and remind you all of the audio tape that was leading this whole discussion just last week. The audio tape seemed to suggest that Nolan was on that boat with the enhanced volume of the background conversation. It seemed to suggest that Nolan was in some kind of distress on the Triton around 4 something, a little bit after 4 it seemed, and that he may have lost his life on that boat. The transcripts to that audio tape, if you will recall, included comments like, "Is he dead? Oh my God. Nolan, wake up. Get up. He's dead. Oh my God, he's dead." That transcript was playing all over the internet just last week by many reputable journalists and legal minds, including judges, former prosecutors, and others. So I just had to remind you of that as we talk about this latest conversation around the timeline. So, okay, because you know that we cannot have both of these scenarios exist simultaneously. Okay? These lawyers, again, claim that they have witnesses. They told Nancy Grace they have 2 witnesses who saw young Nolan on Horn Island around 6 o'clock, and that their clients left the island around 4:30. If that is true, as Nancy Grace points out, it must be proven to be true. Because as she points out, people can say a whole lot of stuff, but it's in a court of law, when this case gets to the courtroom, it's about what they can prove. So she makes the point, who are these witnesses? Okay? As a good lawyer, a good prosecutor would delve into that. First of all of these hundreds of people out there, you only have 2 people. You only have 2 who can confirm that they saw Nolan, who are saying that they saw Nolan around 6. I love her questions. She asks questions that normal people would ask. Okay, who are these people? Are they friends of your clients? We're not saying they're lying, but are they trying to help the friends out? Okay. Do these 2 witnesses know each other? And it seems that the answer to that is yes. And I don't know that she was suggesting that, well, these 2 people could have concocted that together. Especially if they have some interest in wanting to see these friends cleared. Okay? So her questions, as she said, I love that she says, how does she say it? There's no, when she starts an investigation, she says, nobody is guilty and everyone is suspect. Okay? So for her, I felt that she was sort of taking these gentlemen to school, to law school. And she felt like the seasoned prosecutor, and they seemed like amateurs. As she was describing, the problem with you just stepping forward and saying that you have 2 witnesses, 2 out of these hundreds of people out there. And then she asks the question, well, were these witnesses drinking? This is a legitimate question because everybody suggested that Nolan, the boys, the guys that he traveled there with, I don't like to call them boys because they're all over 16, 17, 18. They're young men. But that's a whole nother story. Sometimes with that culture, when they get into trouble, they're boys. When young men in the African American community get into trouble, they're quickly described as men and quickly have to suffer the consequences, the legal consequences of being convicted of crimes as adults. So I find it interesting that they keep referring to these young men as boys, like they're 10 and 11 and 12. When they are high school seniors and high school graduates. I think this gentleman named Bart is already in college, as Nolan was in community college. So these are young men. Let's just make that clear. But okay, so she asked the question, well, were these witnesses of yours, were they drinking? To which the lawyer had no answer. He didn't know. Well, how can you not know that? When you guys have made Nolan's sobriety an issue. Even that young Warren Hudson, he says, well, we were all drinking so much that day. We just thought that Nolan would sleep on somebody's couch. As he was explaining in a public interview why, they didn't even get concerned about Nolan till about 9 o'clock that night, on the night of the 4th. So I think it's a legitimate question. Who are these witnesses? Have they been drinking? Are they friends of these guys? Do they have some reason to come forward now saying that they saw Nolan on the island? And these lawyers just did not have, any reasonable answers to those questions, which makes you wonder, And so I thought it was important to share that with you. And, it was a long interview, and I just don't have the time to play it in its entirety. So I encourage you to get it, travel to YouTube or wherever you do your streaming, go to YouTube and look for the Nancy Grace Crime Stories with Nancy Grace show, and look for that interview. And I think she calls it the lawyers strike back or something like that. So look for that and play it in its entirety. The other part that I wanted to talk about with my audiences is that she did touch upon with them the autopsy. She points out that how do we kind of move forward with an incomplete autopsy to have been performed? We don't know what the first one said because the Mississippi officials have not stated it. The second autopsy, as she points out, has concluded nothing because there were body parts that were kept by the Mississippi coroner and not shared with Dr. Roger Mitchell, who performed the second autopsy on behalf of the Wonsley family. But as Nancy Grace pointed out in this interview, there were problems with an incomplete autopsy, almost a month now removed from this tragic event. She wants to know from them, well, why do you think the coroner kept this throat tissue of young Nolan, the neck? Why did they keep that? This is her question. Because she points out that, and he had that red discoloration, that deep red discoloration at the back of his head. And so she points out that why would they keep this part when it's so critical to determining cause of death? They also kept the lungs, she noted that. But she points out that, that's standard, as Dr. Mitchell pointed out, that's possible because if they notice something, water in the lungs, they may want to further investigate that. But all of the experts seem to agree that there was no real reason for them to keep the throat tissue, the neck, this part. Because as she noted, a person can drown and then a person can have help drowning. Okay? As she noted, a person can be hit and then put into the water. A person their head can be held down in the water. She noted those scenarios. So to just say that a person drowned does not then by extension mean that there was no foul play. I thought that was very, important that she was asking them, their theories on that. As she went on to ask them, well, if your clients say that they left young Nolan on the island with Katie, this suspicious, mysterious Katie, who first they said they did not know, and then it turned out that they were texting with her when they did not know where Nolan was. So Nancy Grace she pushes this question, well, did they know her or not? You guys seem to be stumbling over that. One minute they said they didn't know her. The next minute they're texting with her. They had no real answer for that. Go back and look at this interview. Again, I have been saying from the early weeks of this investigation, the more you know, the more you need to know. You come away with more questions than answers. And this is after talking to the lawyers in the case, because, a major part of it, because a major piece of the puzzle that is missing, that adds to the confusion, is the absolute silence of the Mississippi officials, which include, as I said in one of my very early videos, immediately there in Ocean Springs, the Sheriff's Department, Sheriff John Ledbetter has not said a single word of details about his investigation, what it has found. None of these boys, young men, who went out to that island with young Nolan and who came back without him and with his phone, none of them have been formally questioned. None of them have taken a polygraph test, which Nancy Grace also pushed these two lawyers on. Because there was one former police officer who's well known on social media. I can't remember his name, but he tried to suggest on her show that these young men had all taken lie detector tests, when it turned out they had taken some tests that really was not the equivalent, as he was suggesting, to a polygraph. And so she made a point to clear that up with that gentleman who was a former police officer, I think in Arizona. She made a point to clear that up for him. And then she made a point to clear it up for these two lawyers. The importance of a polygraph. Even though these two lawyers said that they would not advise their clients to take one, and she agreed that it's pretty much not standard for a defense attorney to advise clients to take a polygraph. But she just wanted to know if these young men had, and they clearly have not. She did get them to answer that question, which goes far to dispute what that other former law enforcement officer has suggested. So I thought that there was a lot in this interview. I think it's about 40 minutes, the interview itself, the full entire interview, but there's so much important discovery type information that she was able to get out of these gentlemen. And again, I say, she comes out of it having scored a knockout, and they come out of it looking like amateurs. That's how I, assess it. So I'm going to move on. I think that was everything that I wanted to to mention in this. But just remember the names of those two attorneys, Tyler Cox and Edward Paulsick, lawyers for the so-called friends of Nolan Wells. And also, take a look at and listen to the interview to see what do you think about this this so-called change in the timeline, which I don't think you actually should change the timeline one bit until you know more about these two witnesses, who they are, do they know the guys on the boat with Nolan, do they have any reason for now coming forward and claiming that they saw Nolan, and what proof is there, as Nancy Grace pointed out. The one picture that they do show of Nolan on that island, clearly, they're saying he's turned around, he's bent over, he's on the Triton. And she even notes on that the only way that people are identifying him in that picture is because of his swimsuit, the Triton that he was wearing. And no doubt the fact that there weren't very many African Americans present, on that boat. But as she notes, how do the other witnesses know that it was him? And the lawyers really had no real answer for that. So let's see how that plays out going forward. I don't think it changes the timeline one bit, especially if you add in the audio tape, which is yet to be discredited. All right, so the next thing I wanted to just talk about, which I thought was an awesome development, I mentioned it at the beginning of this episode, was that the National Association of Black Journalists hosted the Wells Wonsley family and gave Miss Christine and Mr. Elmore an opportunity to just talk about their son and to talk about how this case, how it's playing out so publicly and how it's impacting their lives. She is always quite compelling to me, probably because I'm a mother. I am an African American mother. And I feel her pain deeply. As one young woman said, Miss Tabitha Brown put it so eloquently, I thought. She said, in so many ways, young Nolan is not our son, but he is our son. And so whenever Miss Wells Wonsley is given a platform, I like that. Especially that she has been under so much scrutiny. There have been attacks on her medical practitioner or nurse practitioner job. People have attacked her on her job, even forced an investigation into a fake claim of misconduct, which was quickly closed. Apparently, they have to move forward with an investigation of any misconduct claim, but it was quickly investigated and closed. But she has been under so much public scrutiny, as has her husband. And so it was wonderful to see, and especially to see them interviewed by the veteran journalist, Tiffany Cross, who always keeps the emotion and physical health of Black women at the core of whatever she does. So it was wonderful to see her interviewing them and to give and offering them a platform to share their story. I love that Mr. Elmore talked some, because he seems to be quite reserved. And none of us can imagine, but they both seem to be quite humble and appreciative of the platform to share their story and to keep Nolan's name alive and to keep the investigation into his death moving forward. But Mr. Elmore, he made 3 points that he to him were just key in understanding or explaining why they do not trust the authorities in Mississippi, and they do not trust the story of these young men who traveled to that island with Nolan on that day, on the 4th of July. He said for him, the moment that he spoke, I believe it was with Warren Hudson, and asked, where is Nolan? And the young man explained, well, he wanted to stay back on the island with Katie. Mr. Elmore says, no, not possible. Not his son. He was raised differently from that. That is not something that he would have done. We raised him. You go with someone, you come back with the same people you go with. He says Nolan, number one, would never have just stayed on that island and let them leave him. Number two, he says that Nolan would never have left his phone, that he would never have been separated from his phone. He said that Nolan would come in some mornings when they're still waking up and put that phone in their face, wanting to take pictures and videos and stuff. You know, he said that his son would not be separated from his phone. And he did not believe either that his son would stay behind on an island just to hang out with the girl that he just met. You know, these stories, this story and any news story are particularly involving race. Any American story that catches the attention of the nation can become convoluted. And we can lose sight of what the real basic issues are. That happened with the O.J. Simpson trial. You'll recall that. That trial almost split this country in two. Because there was a way that African Americans saw that whole trial playing out, and there was a way that white America saw that trial playing out. Rodney King, when he was beaten so horrifically by those state troopers, at a time when everybody didn't yet have cell phones, but somebody captured it. I think it was one of their body cams or something. But when that video came out, that split the country almost again down racial lines. Because for African Americans, it was the video proof of what African Americans had been saying was going on forever in this nation with some members of law enforcement. And I have to say that because I used to work with some honorable people in law enforcement. One of my dear childhood friends became a police officer in Connecticut. Okay, so there are good law enforcement people. Okay, and then you have some who seem to come to work to take out their aggressions and their feelings and ideologies about certain groups of people. And so we'll just stop that there. But again, you can view the Wells Wonsley's address before the National Association of Black Journalists. You can view that online. That's where I was able to view it. And again, they were both quite moving. Their attorney, Ben Crump, had some words to say, and so did Reverend Sharpton. I thought it was very, apropos that he added a little Mississippi context to the plight of the Wells Wonsley family. He points out that Mississippi is responding in the way that Mississippi has responded when these kinds of things happened historically. They almost never know what has happened to Black people in circumstances like this. When they can, things are ruled suicides or they are ruled no foul play, even lynchings. So Reverend Sharpton was there to offer the historical, to explain the historical background to why African Americans, including the Wells Wonsley family, do not always trust the authorities there in Mississippi. And that leads to, and I'll close with that leads to the phone, Nolan's phone, as there seems to be some uproar among the other side, which is the side supportive of these young men who left him on that island and who don't seem to know what happened to him. But his cell phone is now, people are wondering why the Wonsley family has not turned over Nolan's cell phone to the Mississippi authorities. Well, let's just put 1 and 1 together. Because 1 and 1, no matter who's doing the adding, 1 and 1 will always equal 2. So let's put 1 and 1 together. If on the same day or the very next day that your son is found lying on the shore, unalived, and his friends returned home without him and went on to their 4th of July celebrations that night, ask yourself if you would trust these people, when the sheriff would come out on the same day that the body was discovered or the very next day and declare there was no foul play. You're going to give Nolan's phone to this person? I don't think so. And Miss Wonsley had to use her Live 360 to track the phone. She was able to track the phone to find out that, guess what? The phone was not on Horn Island. The phone was tracking on land. And she was able to send a girlfriend by that house to pick up Nolan's phone. And she said that when she and her sister looked through that phone, there were no photos, no videos, nothing. She had no explanation for that when she knows that her son was always taking pictures and taking videos. And this was the 4th of July weekend. And he met this beautiful girl, you know, that he was so enamored with it. You know, he didn't even take one picture of her. Would you turn that phone over to these people? Would you? And, okay, so the phone, what else would she conclude? She knows her son. They don't think, number one, that he would have let them take his phone. And you will recall at the very beginning of this, there was a conversation of someone arguing with somebody to give me back my phone. Of course, there's another young man, young Trayston Shepard, who said that was him. But young Trayston Shepard has never said since that he lost his phone that day. He has never explained to anybody that he lost it, that somebody took his phone and why he would be arguing about his phone. But everybody heard that there was a videotape, an audio tape, I'm sorry, of that voice. Somebody was saying, give me back my phone. So the questions continue. As I said, the more answers, the more you learn, you have more questions than you have answers with this story. And I hate to call it a story because it's the loss of a life. For the Wells Wonsley family, this is a tragedy, a family tragedy. And we have to continue to remember that who the victims are. Young Nolan, who has lost his life, a very promising life with a very bright future from all accounts. And one of the lawyers, the Tyler Cox, he just kept repeating, Nolan was just good Ocean Springs kids, like all the others were Ocean Springs kids, that he was just a good kid. And he was like a brother to these young men. Okay. We know that he was a good kid. Why is he the only one who didn't make it back home? That's what we're trying to find out. There's no one who questions that he was a good kid. We all know that. Because if he wasn't, you would already be telling us all everything, every dirty deed that he had done. You would have already been telling us that. But he's a good kid. He was a good kid. And that's all you can say because that's real. And even though in death you have tried to say that he was drinking so heavily that day, when all you have to do is look at all the pictures, everybody in the water had a can in their hand, it looked like. And again, if with so many people drinking, why did this one African American child, who also may have been drinking, why did he end up dead? And everybody else who had been drinking all day, as Warren Hudson said, why did they make it back home safe and sound? Well enough to go on with their 4th of July celebrations. So pay attention to this case. Keep it in your mouth, keep it on your lips, as his mother has asked us to responsibly, okay? Report on it, talk about it. She always asked in Nolan's name, because Nolan was a peace lover and a peacemaker. She always asked that we stay that way. Although some of us get a little upset about this development and that we are now 1 month out and we still don't know what happened to this child. But Miss Wells Wonsley reminds us that Nolan was a peacekeeper and a peacemaker, and that he would not want any, disturbances to come out of this. And she reminds everybody to be vigilant, but to remain peaceful. And so I want to thank you for tuning in today. I'm a little, detailed on this because, as you know, I'm not alone, but there are a lot of people who are just moved by this young man's life and the tragic way that it ended. And we want, as Attorney Ben Crump says, justice for Nolan Xavier Wells. Thank you for tuning in. This has been another edition of Faith, Family, and Political Affairs. Oh, I should say, I did want to mention to you, please tune in on the 16th, which is Sunday. We're going to be just recapping and discussing, hopefully with a couple of other people, this latest development with the lynchings across the South. A veteran civil rights organization called Julian, Julian, named for Mr. Julian Bond. But they are keeping account of these lynchings. They even go into court to try to see that some of these are adjudicated and that people are held accountable. As they have noted that now the number has gone up, but 70 plus people have been lynched. They call them modern day lynchings across the South in states that include my home state, North Carolina, in Charlotte, North Carolina. She noted two cases the other day when she was speaking on the Don Lemon show. And then I have a graphic that is on my Facebook page of the other states and the number of lynchings that Julian has been able to document. 16 in Mississippi, 16 in Texas, a number in Florida, a number in Alabama. It's very disturbing. But I think it's something that, as sad as it is, we must talk about it because we must protect ourselves in the midst of these kinds of developments across our country, particularly those of us who live in southern states. It is so difficult to have to say that, but we don't want to be those ostriches with our heads in the sand, because this is uncomfortable to talk about. We want to be prepared as much as we can be in the face of a changing climate across our country. So once again, check us out on Zoom this Sunday from noon to 1. I've called this the resurgence of lynchings in America. And I named it Road of Remembrance because a young lady last week was found hanging in a tree in an area called Road of Remembrance in Jackson, Mississippi. So do tune in and add your voice and your comments to our conversations. Thank you once again for tuning in to this edition of Faith, Family, and Political Affairs.